please be on your best behavior. Whoever can make me laugh the most, whoever can tell us the best joke today is going to get a prize. So let's see who's going to be the winner. And it's a free prize. There's no strings attached. We're going to send it straight to your home. All you have to do is make me laugh. So let's see who's going to be the big winner today. I can't wait. Okay, let's take a look at our charts here. Euro, US dollar, 30 minutes, says Harley. All right, we're on it. So what we have here is a 30-minute chart, and it's the Euro, US dollar. Thanks, Harley, for the request. So I'm going to draw some zones in here in red. These zones are the areas on the chart where we see price has turned around over and over again. I'm kind of glad, actually, that we're looking at a chart that's a little bit choppy like this, because what that means is I can show you sort of one way of managing markets that are a little bit choppy, because you can, it is possible to trade them. People do trade them, and you can trade them with naked charts. So maybe that's something that we can talk about today, thanks to Harley's request here. Okay, so let's just look at this right here. So let's take a look at this. You can see here we've had some touches, obviously, here. We have recent touches here and there. So we're sort of caught between four. All right, so what we're looking at here is price caught between these two zones here. Now we've got some other areas sort of beyond where we are, but we're sort of in this area right here, aren't we, on the 30-minute euro. So what can we do? Well, one real simple thing is to wait for price to reach the extremes and then trade it to the other direction, to the other side, right? So if we were doing that here, where are some of the signals that we've seen recently? Now, we can't really look over here because this is when this zone is sort of getting established. But if we go further along the line here, you will notice a couple of our friends, such as the bearish big shadow is right here, right? This is a sell signal right here. Now that one, you may be forgiven for not taking that one because actually price blew beyond this 41.13 level and made it up to the 41.45 level before coming down here and sort of printing this continuation big shadow. So let's say we didn't like that one. But what we did have instead was this opportunity down here. And that is this one right here. Look at this big shadow. Let me zoom in. It's this one right here. So for those of you that have been around the naked trading webinars, you'll know that how do we trade these? Well, the big shadows are basically on support and resistance. A big shadow is an engulfing bar, so it engulfs the prior bar. We also like to see the big shadow bar. Big shadows are not to be confused with wicks on candles, right? I know that some people will call those wicks the shadow of the candle. The shadow in this case is the bar next to our prior bar, and it's much bigger than our prior bar. So it's one of those instances when your shadow is bigger than you, and that's basically what we have here. We have the shadow bar here completely engulfs the prior bar. It also tends to be a bar that's got a much wider range than we've seen in some time, and you can see that's the case here. In fact, this big shadow I think engulfs the prior bar and the bar before that. I don't think it quite engulfs the next bar, but you can see it certainly has the widest range we've seen in 1, 2, 3, 4 bars at least. Probably not as wide as that one. But the important thing here is that we see this printing on a zone down here. So what do? We place a buy stop above the high, and you can see right here above the high, it's triggered. The very next bar, we see it's taken, the trade's taken, and so we're off to the races. Now where do we target? Well, in this case, we could clearly target the other side of the zone, which is where we've seen some price action recently, right here. These bar highs over here. And you can see we did eventually make it over there. So You're probably thinking, well, that's all well and good. That's, the hindsight's 20/20 and blah blah blah. But Coco is asking about taking trades against the trend. Yeah, I sometimes do that. Like I sold the Swissy this week on the 4-hour chart. Although I guess the overall trend on the Swissy is pretty is down. And if we slap our trend indicator on the Swissy, maybe we'll do that in a minute. We probably would see that the trend is down, depending on which time frame you're looking at. But say you're looking at the daily or something, you'd probably say it's down. But to answer your question, Coco, yeah, I will. If you don't have the Big Shadow ebook, I can certainly give that to you. But basically, this is a textbook example of a Big Shadow. Completely engulfs the prior bar. It's on our support and resistance zone. It's got a nice long range, a wide range. The close is up near the high here for a bullish Big Shadow. That's what we want to see. And we see it trades higher than the high on the very next bar. It did come down here and retrace a bit. Our stop loss is down here below the low. That's not triggered, right? Even on this retrace where it came down to this level and touched it, we did not find our stop triggered. And then eventually price made its way back up to the zone up here and cashed us out. So the risk to reward on that one, we'd be risking about 34 pips and it's 36 pips reward. So it's about a 1-to-1. Now, let's go down here and see if we have anything else. We don't. This was not a Big Shadow touch down here, and this touch wasn't very interesting either. So basically where we're at is we're waiting to see if we might find a nice signal here, right where we are right here, if this holds. If it doesn't hold, what we could do is wait for it to come down here and see if we can find a signal down here at 40.24. So that's the Euro US dollar 30-minute chart as I see it right now. And that's about it. Someone else wanted to look at the Swissy, I think. So let's do that. Which time frame should we look on the Swissy? Do you always wait for price to come back after the Big Shadow? Asks Coco. I'm not sure I know what you mean, Coco. So let's. Do I wait for price to come back? I wait for price to go in the expected direction. So I'll use a buy stop or a sell stop. Pullback. No, I don't wait for a pullback at all. In fact, I use buy stops for sell stops, which means price must go in the expected direction to trigger my trade. Hope that answers your question. How exactly do you draw the line? Great question. Let us draw some lines here. Let's say we're looking at the 4-hour Swissy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a set of lines on this chart. Here is the daily chart, right? So on the daily chart, I need to find all of my support and resistance zones. Remember, I'm trading the 4-hour chart here, right? So because I'm trading the 4-hour chart, I need to draw in my support and resistance zones on the daily chart, which is one time frame higher. And that's how I'll do it. No matter what time frame we're looking at, I'll always go one time frame higher and draw my zones in. And so this is how we do this. We're looking for those spots on the chart where price has repeatedly reversed. You can see here, we do see that here, and we do see that here. Support, support, and support. How do you recognize a false breakout? Dave, I think that's a great question. We've just talked about that today, actually, in another webinar. Maybe what we can do, Dave, is next month we'll have a webinar just on that, and maybe you can remind me, Dave. Next month we'll do a last kiss webinar, because that's what we use, the last kiss to decide whether or not we have a false breakout. Yeah, if you remind me, Dave, we'll do that in like the 3rd week of April. All right. So you got some resistance here as well. So these are the spots on the chart where prices repeatedly reversed. Now, it's really important that I want to see touches on both sides of the line here. Why do I draw a dotted line? Because it's a beer belly, right? These aren't walls on the chart, they're beer bellies. Just like a beer belly, you can push into it a little bit, the soft thing. It offers some resistance, but, it's a little bit fuzzy. You don't know exactly where it is. So that's why my lines are dashed, because I want to remind myself of that. So what we have here also is an extreme low, so we'll draw a zone down there too. If you ever get stuck, one thing that helps me is I'll go to a line chart, and that will help you identify these bends in the road. And these bends here are going to help you establish your zones on the chart here. So just dropping down to a line chart like this will often help out a lot. Let's go back to candlesticks though. Okay, so now we're on those are our daily zones. We'll drop down to the 4-hour chart now, and we'll draw some more lines on the chart, some more zones, support and resistance zones on the chart. These I'll do in a different color to remind myself that, they're from the 4-hour chart. That's the only reason I do that. And I'll draw both of them. It doesn't really matter. So let's look at, there we go. There's one there. There's probably one there. Why do I say that there's one right here? All of these touches right here on the bottom. All of these touches here on the bottom and these touches over here on the top of this zone suggest that that's an area right there. Got one right there. We've got one down here. We've got one right here. Well, there's also going to be one somewhere in here, probably right around there. And again, when it gets a little bit sloppy like that, again, the line chart's going to really help you out here. You can see these touches clear up with the line chart. The line chart just connects the closing prices, right? All right, so let's zoom in and look at where we're at now. So this is the 4-hour Swissy chart. With this chart, you can see here, one of the most interesting spots on the chart is happened a couple days ago, actually. And it was just yesterday that we had a big shadow right here. Let me point it out. There's our big shadow right there. Let's zoom in on this one. So it's right there. And what happened was price came up to this red zone here. It's 92.21, right? Created a big shadow. What's interesting about this big shadow was that it engulfed not only the prior bar, but the bar before that and the bar before that. And it was right here on this 92.21 zone. And looking on the daily chart, you can see here that we recently had some brilliant touches right here. In fact, they're all right here. Look at that. So all of these touches on this zone. So this is the first time that price came back up and touched this same area. So where it was once support, it became resistance on the 4-hour chart. We'll go back down to the 4-hour chart. Right there. And how did we know that that was going to be some resistance there? Was just the big shadow. The big shadow told us the story. It did trigger lower on the very next bar, and it came down here, traded lower, slowly moved all the way down, and then this bar right here, where it touched the 91.44 zone, again, how do we know this is a zone? Well, most recently when price paused, it paused right on this zone. And then before that, when price came down, it found support right on this zone at 91.44. So it wasn't a big surprise that price came down here and paused. Now the question is it going to break out and keep going lower, or is it going to turn around? Well, it turned around rather quickly, and this was yesterday during the European session. Coco is asking, so you're looking at these engulfing candles at logical areas of support and resistance. That's right, Coco. most of the naked systems I trade are based on support and resistance. And anyone here, if you want the ebook, I'll certainly give it to you. highpipdiet@gmail.com. It's highpipdiet@gmail.com. You can have this stuff for free, right? So we're not selling anything. It's all there for the taking. But we talk about these things, these sorts of setups, during these webinars. I think last week we talked about a different one. But the big shadow is basically an engulfing bar right on support and resistance. And we need both of them, Coco, and I'm glad you asked, because if you just see price go to a support and resistance level, like let's just say we saw price come up to this level here at 91.46. Well, we don't just immediately sell when we see that happen, right? We need to have the other clue, and the other part of that is the price pattern. You need to have that. John, if you want anything, all this stuff is free. It's highpipdiet@gmail.com if you want anything. Okay? That's my email. So when price came up here to 91.44, right, we didn't sell. Why didn't we sell? Because we didn't have anything. We didn't have a kangaroo tail. We didn't have any sort of last kiss or big shadow or anything that told us that we needed to, that price was going to turn around here. It wasn't until price made it to the next zone at 92.21 that we decided, okay, now we are in that spot. Now we're in that area where we have a bearish big shadow, we have a sell signal, and it triggered on the very next bar, didn't it? Let's zoom in here to make sure that we see this. What I mean by triggering on the next bar is the next bar has to trade lower to trigger our sell stop, and it just did by a few pips. So the low on this bar, 91.76. The low on this bar, 91.72. So it did go a few pips lower, right? And that's exactly what we need to get in. Now I know some traders are into, getting in on a retrace or whatever and things like that. And you can do that as well. But for me, the most rock solid method of getting into these trades is to simply put your sell stop a few pips below the low of the bar here. And we'll make this one a different color too so that it's obvious. Right here. Right there. That's our sell stop, and the very next bar triggers it. Where does our stop loss go? Goes up beyond the big shadow on the other side of it right there. And our profit target, what you can do, and what I like to do often, is to have several. Okay, Pip Finder, you won so far. So far, you're the winner. Oh, is that you, Colin? I didn't know. Do high pip diets give beer bellies? Okay, so right here what we have is, wow, look at this. It's really taken off. Some news came out, right? Yeah. This is what happens when you're a technical trader. Things happen on the chart and you're like, oh, there must have been a fundamental news report. Crude oil, okay. Well, there you go. So basically what happens is it triggers right here. Now I'm going to look at a couple of possible targets here. One is the first zone, which is right here, this zone right here, and the next would be the next zone down the line. So one way of managing these trades, a lot of people do that, is they'll split up their trade into a couple different lots. And so you take your sell on the bearish big shadow. Again, this is a trade I took just 2 days ago and got out of it yesterday. You sell right here on the big shadow. It triggers on the next bar, comes all the way down to this zone. Now, when it gets here, you cash out some of it, and then you can move the rest to break even and see if you can shoot for this next target down here. And what ended up happening here is it just shot through it. I actually thought that it was going to reverse here, so I kind of dumped all of it here just because it didn't look like it was going to make it through there. And one way you can tell is the European fakeout. If you're watching the market during the European fakeout, you'll often see the market go one way early on during the European session, and that's usually the wrong way. And when I saw the Swissy falling I thought, okay, the Swissie's falling here. That's a bad thing, right? That's something that tells me that it may turn around during the European session and start going higher, and it did. So that's another clue. If you watch what some of the, it's really interesting. Some other traders and I have noted, and this isn't always the case, but there's certain patterns that you'll see. Like sometimes during the Asian session, it'll sort of drift in the wrong direction, and then later trade higher. Start trading in the correct direction. Or let's say you're bullish the euro, right? And you think the euro is going to go up. Well, if the euro starts trading a little bit lower during the Asian session, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That usually means you may be right. So that's something to keep in mind. Anyone else want to look at a chart? Anything that you want to look at? We've looked at a couple different ones here. This one's not that interesting anymore, really, to me. Kiwi Daily, says Alan. All right, let's do that. Let's do the Kiwi Daily. Do we have that on? So Coco, I'm glad you asked about the. I'm glad you asked about the trend, because what I use is a little girl around the corner, and I give her some cookies and I say, I'll show her a chart and I'll ask her, what do you think is going on with this chart? Is the chart going mostly up, going mostly down, or going up and down? And you can turn it to a line chart. So if we showed this chart to a 8-year-old girl, what do you think the 8-year-old would say? And if you don't know, that's okay. You can find your own 8-year-old. But if you don't know, the obvious answer, I think, is that this is going up and down. So I wouldn't really say that there's any direction here. I wouldn't really say there's any trend. Boyke wants more cookies. Yeah. I do too. That's because it's late and I want a midnight snack. Okay, so basically, would you consider yesterday's big shadow? No. I wouldn't consider that one, and the reason why, I'll show you, is the low is not low enough on the big shadow bar. So I'm assuming you're talking about this bar right here. We'll zoom in here. That bar doesn't trade low enough, so and I'm totally honest, Coco. If you I think sometimes as traders we complicate things a little bit too much. And when all we really have to do is just ask someone who has no conception of trading or the markets, whatever, which is usually why you need to catch them before they hit age 10, because usually by the time they hit age 10, they already got a whole theory of economics and stuff like that. So if you get a kid between, say, 5 to 9 is ideal, and just ask them, say, is this line going up, mostly up, or is it going mostly down, or is it going mostly up and down? I'm guessing most of the time we're going to get mostly up and down, which means, directionless, no trend. Some of our trend indicators may tell us that it's a mostly down. But on this chart right here, I'd say it's probably mostly up and down. So we don't really have a direction here. And I wouldn't say this is a big shadow just because technically it didn't fit. It didn't trade low enough there. Kangaroo tails and big shadows are both sort of the same. If you added a big shadow together, you'd get a kangaroo tail in most cases. Not all, but in many cases you'd get that. So I don't really prefer one or the other. They're both really good. So on this chart, I suppose our next point of interest is going to be somewhere right around here, actually. And that's because we have these touches here and right here. Those are really critical right there. So it looks like our Kiwi pair is headed up to 76.60. And again, look, going back, you'll see some more, right? So right here we have little touches right there as well. And of course, back here you'll see price paused here at this zone before it traveled higher, and on the way back down, price paused here again. So I would say that just looking at the Kiwi right now, it looks like it's headed to 76.60, and then from there we can reassess to see if we get any kangaroo tails or big shadows or something to give us a hint that it's going to start trading lower. So how's that? What was the other chart that we wanted to look at? Was there another one we wanted? We were looking at the Aussie, the pound. You want to look at the Aussie or the pound, or was it the Aussie pound, John? Coco is saying on this chart the trend was obviously down, but it seems like the bias has changed to up after the 75.52 level was breached. Well, well, Coco, I can certainly see where what you're looking at. That makes sense to me. But I wouldn't necessarily say that this is an uptrend, this pair. And again, that's just because I think if we ask our trend indicator, we get that answer that the line's mostly going up and down. Now, let's fast forward. Let's say that this pair starts traveling higher and higher, and let's say it gets up into this area up here. Well, then we may see our trend indicator tell us that it is going mostly up. It really depends on your perspective, right? If we zoom in a bit like this and we ask our trend indicator right here, is this line going mostly down, mostly up and down, or mostly up? Maybe we get mostly down here, right? Because of all these, that's because we zoomed in a bit. So it really depends on your perspective as well. I think if it gets higher than 78, then I might say, okay, now we're in an uptrend or something like that. Yeah, I think it's still ranging too, Karul. I agree with you. No arrow around the 15th, says Blakey. Yeah, we didn't really get anything nice down here. Did the weekly have something? The weekly didn't have anything either. This is not a big shadow because it doesn't engulf the prior bar. The prior bar has a lower low, right? So that wasn't a big shadow. What else do we look at? Let's look at the Aussie dollar. I think John, did you want to see that? Let's take a look at that one. There's all this stuff on here. There's the fib. And there's some weird lines. Get rid of those. Trend lines. So, on this pair, you can see we'll draw in our support and resistance zones. Certainly have one around here. Although you wouldn't know from what price did recently. It just blew right by it. Now, this is a great example. See how we have all these messy touches in here? We've got some nice ones back here on this zone at 99.45. And we've even got some nice ones recently over here. But in here it gets a bit sticky. So what I do is I'll go to the line chart for that. And then that should help us find exactly where it should be. So maybe it should be like up here. Maybe that makes more sense. 99.65. That sometimes can help. And then we probably have one down here. And we're going to have one right up here where this high was. And we're going to have one down here. Right around there. Now, do I ever use pivot points? Not really. I mean, pivot points are interesting to me, but I don't really use them that much. I just think that support and resistance to me is much more important, Harley, you know? Because what ends up happening, yeah, what ends up happening is pivot points can be good if they line up with an area of support and resistance. To me, the most important places on the chart are those places where price turns around over and over again. So to me, that's really where I want to be concentrating my trades on those spots. Yeah. And sometimes they will line up with pivots, and I know a lot of traders do follow pivots. And there's some great trading systems that are set up around pivots. But for me, it's just easier to find those spots on the chart where price is repeatedly reversed. So here we're just looking at price moving up higher and higher, right? I mean, when you get something like this, price may come back down here and find support on 102.50. And if it does, then we might find another buy signal on this pair. For those of you that have been watching the other webinar on the Aussie dollar, you know that really what I've been doing is just looking for places to buy it. That's really all I want to do is buy it. And so any opportunity we get to buy this, I think it's great. What I'd like to see happen here is for it to go a little bit higher, then come back down here and give us a nice signal. Right here would be great. A nice bullish bar right there. That would be a great place to get in. That would be my dream trade. So that's what we could do. We could certainly do that. All right. But right now I don't see anything. It's just obviously in the uptrend. And the issue with this though is that we're on a currency pair that doesn't really, we haven't seen it up at this level really, right? So what you can do is shoot for like round numbers. Like let's say you get a trade down here at 102.50 or 103, you get in at 103, let's say on the daily chart. Then you might shoot for 104 or you might shoot for 105 up here, just round numbers. You can also use fib extensions. That's one way of doing it. So you could say, I've got this zone right here, or this range from this high up here to this low down here, and then okay, well that lines up, the 161 lines up here, so you could target up here. That's another thing you can do when you don't have well-established zones on your chart, which is often the case with pairs like the Aussie or the Swissy or those that are in sort of areas that we haven't seen it trading at for a long time, if ever. Coco says, I'm still having problems understanding where exactly you draw your line. Well, Coco, if you email me, I can give you a great free ebook on that. But essentially, what we're looking for are just touches repeatedly at the same spot. So, for example, yeah, Hartley's got it. Harley's got it. Harley is saying at highs and lows, levels of importance that are hit several times over and over again. Exactly. That's exactly it. So let's see what we have here. We've got price finding resistance right here at 99.65, and then again here at 99.65, and then again right here, and then again right here. Even here in this false breakout, it briefly made it above and then fell back down, right? So this 99.65 area right here seems to be a pretty important spot. So what happens in the future? In the future, the same spot, the same 99.65, same area is now support right there, and even again right there. So that's it. That's all these lines represent. That's it. That's all they're really indicating to me, is that historically on this chart, that line is a place on the chart where price likes to turn around. Doesn't mean it will. It certainly will blow through it sometimes, like we've just recently seen. But again, I'd just like to point out, what did it do before it blew through there? It actually paused. It stopped. So this day, when it rocketed up, it stopped right there. And then the next day it made it through. So that to me is very interesting that this spot on the chart, 99.65, we've repeatedly seen price stop, turn around, and go the other way. Happens over and over and over again. And I often, people ask me, well, what about historically, like in the past, how far back do you go? Well, here again, these are the same zones that I drew based on our recent chart, but if we look back, you can see we could have drawn them back here just as easily, where price got caught between 98.22 and 97.20 right here. So these sorts of areas pop up on the charts over and over again. Hopefully that helps. Yep, but we don't just trade them, right? I don't just trade these spots, just blindly expecting that price is going to turn around. How do you estimate if a level is going to hold or not? Well, Coco, you just led me into my next thing that I was going to talk about, which is we look for price patterns. We look for very simple price patterns, right? So for right here, let's see if we can find a big shadow here. Where can we find a big shadow? Here's actually here's one right here. So you have this one right there. So let's zoom in here. Yeah, this is a little bit tricky. It's a little bit tricky, but basically right here, yeah, we use a crystal ball. What we do is when we see price get up here, all we do is we wait to see if it's going to give us a signal in terms of a reliable price pattern. And here we have a pretty good one, which is the big shadow. Price came up here, touched our zone, and this bar completely engulfed the prior bar. That's pretty good. It has a lower low, it has a higher high, it closes down near the low, it's got a wider range, completely engulfs the prior bar. And the other thing which is really interesting about this, and this is, again, one of those things that sort of optimal trades will have this characteristic, look how much of this price pattern is unique to these two bars. In other words, these two bars which make up our big shadow formation here, if I take this little shaded area, that's the chunk of this two-bar formation which is unique to this area of the chart. In other words, we don't see any price in this area. This is the only time we've seen price print up here on this chart. That's another reason why we might see a reversal, right? And we did. And it came down to the next zone, and then it went down to the next zone, and then it came back up, sort of got caught between these two zones and then traded higher. But the point is, at this stage, price hadn't been up here in a long time. And we can see that by looking to the left on the chart. If we see an area to the left here where it's clear, that's a pretty good clue that we might have found a place on the chart where price is going to turn around. A swing high or a swing low. A reversal point. So not only do we have a bearish big shadow, not only is it on an area of the chart where price is repeatedly reversed, but it's also price is printed where we haven't seen price print in some time. So that's good. Coco, how I haven't tried Heiken Aishi candles, Boyke. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I know what you're talking about. With this style of trading, asked Coco, how many trades on average do you take per day or week? Well, I like to stick to the 4-hour charts and the daily charts, or the weekly charts. Sometimes the weekly too, if we get a good setup like we did last week on the odd CAD. But I think I just like saying odd CAD. But yeah, so usually maybe like 2 or 3 a week, something like that, Coco, on average. You can go down to the 1-hour charts and go crazy, but you really need to make sure your support and resistance zones are good. Otherwise, you can get burned down there on the 1-hour charts. You really need to have some solid zones down there. So, yeah, so that's the Aussie. What was it? Was there a pair we want to talk about? Can we squeeze in one more? You can, trying trader, I appreciate the question. Are most of your trades reversals or with the trend? I actually think, and some of you other guys know, some of the traders here know this, you can go both ways. It really depends on your preference, if you're a trend trader or not. So the traders that I know, we just help them figure out what kind of personality do you have as a trader. Are you more likely to look for reversals? Are you more comfortable with reversals? Or do you like to follow the trend? And you can trade these setups either way. There's just little tweaks in the characteristics of the naked patterns depending on whether you're more of a with the trend type trader or against the trend. The stops are just on the other side of the formation donkey. So for example, speak of the devil, here is on the 30-minute chart. Remember we were looking at this 30-minute chart? On the 30-minute chart here, I was talking about possibly finding a support down here. I don't know if you guys were all here, but we were looking at this earlier. If this bar closes in the next 12 minutes, I think it's going to be a big shadow. Low is 40.51, and the low of the previous bar is 40.51. Yeah, so it's equal lows. If this bar closes like somewhere where it is right here, that's a bullish big shadow. And so what you would do is what I would do is I would put my buy stop above the high and wait for the next bar to trigger it. My stop loss goes down below the low, and I'll look to target the next zone. Now the problem with this one, of course, is that the next support and resistance zone isn't that far away. It's only 20 pips away, and our stop loss is going to be something like 40 pips away, 45 pips away. So if that's the case, what we could do is just simply target the next zone up here, which is 50 pips away or something like that. But so that's how we manage the stop. Stops just go on the other side of the formation. Trying trader is asking about which do you find are lower risk? Well, it just depends on the candle size, I suppose, and how far your zone is, trying trader. So if you're just targeting your exits, and there are many ways of exiting, but if you're just targeting the next zone as your exit, if it's pretty far, then you probably have a pretty good reward to risk ratio. And if your candles are a little bit smaller, that's also going to help. But with patterns like the big shadow, you want to see big candles. It does make sense to scale in and out of positions, Dre. I do think so. For example, let's say we were looking at this trade. Let's say we ended up having a big shadow trade here. What we could do is we could just take partial profit at the first zone there, and then take some more profit at this next zone. You know what I mean? So you're just sort of riding it to this zone, dropping some, and then dropping some more up here, things like that. Some people like to take profit at each zone as the market approaches each next zone. Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of traders will do that, and at some point you might want to move your stop to break even, so you don't have any more risk on the table. William, you can fade these patterns. So if you get a kangaroo tail that doesn't work out, you can fade it and go in the opposite direction if it doesn't work. And you can do that with big shadows as well. Most traders I know have a difficult time doing that, though. You need to be really flexible in the brain. You really need to be flexible to be able to do that. So that's a little bit tricky for some people. But it certainly can be done. Certainly can be done. I think we're getting to the end of the line here, folks. I would like to sit here and look at charts all night, but I think we're going to probably wrap it up here. So thanks for making the time to be here, folks. I know that you have lots of other things to do, and I think thank you very much, Trying Trader. Thanks, Boyke, again. Thank you very much, everyone. It's High Pip Diet, gmail.com. Okay? Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for spending time here. All right? Take care, everyone. Bye.